The sun was slowly setting on the horizon when Lucas and Mariana's plane finally landed on the tarmac of their hometown. After 2 dream weeks spent on the heavenly beaches of Bali, the young married couple couldn't wait to start their new life together. The excitement of their recent union was still palpable, their faces beaming with happiness as they walked down the catwalk, hand in hand. Lucas, a tall brunette with hazel eyes, couldn't help but cast loving glances at his wife. Mariana, a little brunette with sparkling green eyes, smiled back at him with the same intensity. They had spent the flight reminiscing about the magical moments of their honeymoon, laughing out loud as they recalled their adventures and discoveries. "Do you remember the look on the waiter's face when you spilled your cocktail on your dress?" Lucas teased as he collected their luggage from the conveyor belt. Mariana nudged him playfully. "Hey, it was your fault, Mr. Clumsy. You startled me with your tickles." Their complicity was obvious to everyone around them. They crossed the airport hall, impatient to find their loved ones who would be waiting for them. And indeed, a small group had formed near the exit, brandishing a colorful banner, "Welcome Newlywed." The reunion was warm and noisy. Lucas' parents, Marie and Robert, hugged them and bombarded them with questions about their trip. The couple's best friends, Sophie and Thomas, were there too, all smiles, ready to help them with their luggage. However, amidst this outpouring of joy, Mariana couldn't help but notice something missing. Her smile faltered slightly when she realized that her mother, Dona Clotilde, had not come to welcome them. Lucas, attentive to his wife's slightest reactions, immediately perceived her change in mood. Maybe she had something wrong, he whispered softly in her ear, trying to reassure her. Mariana nodded, grateful for his attempt at reassurance, but a hint of worry lingered in her eyes. The relationship between Lucas and his stepmother had always been complicated. Dona Clotilde, a woman with a strong character and strong opinions, had never really approved of their union. She found Lucas too young, too carefree for her precious daughter. Despite the young man's efforts to win her affection, Dona Clotilde remained distant and critical. The group left the airport, chatting happily. Lucas and Mariana got into Thomas' car, who had offered to take them home. The journey was lively, the couple sharing a few anecdotes from their stay, but the excitement of finding their love nest took over. "I can't wait to see how the painting progresses," Mariana says, her eyes shining. They had entrusted Sophie with the task of supervising some small jobs in their new house while they were away. Everything went well, Sophie reassured them from the passenger seat. "You will love the result." Finally, the car stopped in front of a charming suburban house. Lucas and Mariana exchanged an emotional look. It was their home, the start of their new life. They warmly thanked their friends and got out of the car, their suitcases in hand. However, as they approached the entrance, Lucas sensed something was wrong. The lights were off, and there were no signs of life inside. A heavy silence reigned around the house. "It's weird," he muttered, frowning. "Sophie, are you sure everything was okay when you stopped by last time?" Sophie, who was about to leave, stopped abruptly. "Yes, absolutely. I was there 3 days ago and everything was normal." Mariana, feeling the tension rising, moved towards the front door. She took out her keys and tried to insert them into the lock. To his great surprise, they did not return. "Lucas," she called, her voice shaking. "The lock has been changed." The young man quickly joined her, incredulous. He tried in turn, but had to face the facts: their keys no longer worked. A feeling of panic began to overwhelm them. "Maybe it's a mistake," suggested Thomas, who had joined them. "We should knock, in case anyone is inside." Lucas nodded and knocked firmly on the door. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then suddenly they heard footsteps inside. The door slowly opened, revealing a man in his 50s, looking confused. "I can help you?" he asked, looking in turn at the 4 young people on his porch. Lucas, disoriented, spoke. "Excuse me, but this is our house. We just came back from our honeymoon and—" The man interrupted, his expression changing from confusion to understanding. "Oh, I see. You must be the previous owners. I'm sorry, but I bought this house a week ago. Everything is perfectly legal. I have the papers if you want to see them." A heavy silence fell over the group. Mariana clutched Lucas' arm, seeking physical support as her world seemed to fall apart. Lucas, for his part, felt a dull anger rising within him, mixed with a deep incomprehension. "It's impossible," he finally said. "There must be a mistake. We never put this house up for sale." The man, visibly uncomfortable, disappeared inside for a moment before returning with a sheaf of documents. "Listen, I understand that the situation is difficult for you. Here are the deeds of sale. Everything is in order, signed by a certain Dona Clotilde acting as your legal representative." Hearing this name, Mariana let out a muffled cry. "My mother? Was it my mother who sold our house?" The reality of the situation was beginning to hit them hard. Sophie and Thomas exchanged worried looks, not knowing how to react to this surreal situation. Lucas, trying to remain calm, asked to see the papers. The man handed them to him without hesitation. Looking through them quickly, the young groom had to face the facts. The signature at the bottom of the document was indeed that of his mother-in-law. "I'm so sorry," the man repeated, visibly embarrassed by this turn of events. "If I had known." Mariana, with tears in her eyes, turned to Lucas. "What are we going to do? Where are we going to go?" Lucas hugged her, trying to comfort her despite his own distress. "We're going to go see your mother. She must have an explanation." They thanked the man for his patience and apologized for the inconvenience. Dazed, they returned to Thomas's car, who immediately offered to take them to Dona Clotilde. The journey took place in heavy silence, everyone lost in their thoughts. Mariana kept wondering how her mother could have done such a thing to them. Lucas, for his part, tried to contain his anger, aware that he had to stay strong for his wife. When they arrived in front of Dona Clotilde's house, a small Mediterranean-style villa, Lucas took a deep breath. "Do you want me to come with you?" he asked Mariana gently. She nodded, grateful. "Please. I don't think I can face this alone." They got out of the car, leaving Sophie and Thomas waiting. Hand in hand, they walked towards the front door. Mariana hesitated for a moment before ringing the bell, as if this simple gesture would confirm that this was not just a bad dream. The door opened, revealing Dona Clotilde. The woman, around 60 years old, with a proud bearing and a piercing gaze, seemed surprised to see them. "Mariana? Lucas? What are you doing here? I thought you were still in Bali." Mariana, unable to contain her emotions any longer, exploded. "Mom, how could you? Our house, did you sell it?" Dona Clotilde's face instantly closed. She gave Lucas a cold look before answering. "Come in. This isn't a conversation to be had on the doorstep." The couple followed the matriarch inside, with heavy hearts. In the richly decorated living room, Dona Clotilde settled into her favorite armchair, inviting Lucas and Mariana to take a seat on the sofa in front of her. "I imagine you want an explanation," she began in a cold voice. "Explanations?" Lucas exclaimed, struggling to contain his anger. "You sold our house without our consent. How is that even possible?" Dona Clotilde fixed him with an icy gaze. "I had power of attorney. A precautionary measure Mariana had given me years ago, in case anything happened to her." Mariana, stunned, vaguely remembered having signed this document. It was long before she met Lucas, at a time when she often went on trips for work. She never imagined that her mother would use this power of attorney in this way. "But why, Mom?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do this to us?" For the first time, a glimmer of remorse flashed in Dona Clotilde's eyes. She sighed deeply before answering. "I needed money. Gambling debts. I thought I could pay it all off before you came back, buy the house back. But things didn't go as planned." The shock of this revelation hit Lucas and Mariana head-on. They never suspected that Dona Clotilde might have gambling problems. "And now?" Lucas asked, trying to keep calm. "What are we supposed to do? Where are we going to live?" Dona Clotilde shrugged her shoulders, a gesture that stood in stark contrast to the seriousness of the situation. "You're young. You can start over somewhere else. I did what I had to do to get out of a bad situation." Mariana, tears flowing freely down her cheeks, stood up abruptly. "How can you be so cold? This was our home, our future." Lucas joined her, putting a protective arm around her shoulders. He looked his mother-in-law straight in the eyes. "What you have done is unforgivable. We will find a way to get our property back, with or without your help." With these words, they left the house, leaving Dona Clotilde alone with her regrets. Outside, Sophie and Thomas were waiting for them, worried. Seeing their devastated faces, they understood that the confrontation had not brought the answers they had hoped for. "You can come to our house this evening," Sophie immediately offered. "We have a guest room." Lucas and Mariana gratefully accepted. As they got into the car, the young couple exchanged a look. Despite the betrayal, despite the pain, they knew that together they would overcome this ordeal. Their love, tested so soon after their marriage, would only grow stronger in the face of adversity. Night fell on the city, taking with it the last vestiges of their idyllic honeymoon. But in the darkness, a glimmer of hope remained. They had lost their home, but not their determination. The adventure of their life together was just beginning, and they were ready to face all obstacles, hand in hand. The night was already well advanced when Lucas and Mariana arrived at Sophie and Thomas's house. Their friend's apartment, while warm, seemed strangely foreign after the events of the day. Sophie led them to the guest bedroom, a small, comfortable room but one that only further highlighted the loss of their own space. "Settle down," Sophie said softly. "There are clean towels in the bathroom. If you need anything, don't hesitate." Mariana nodded, grateful but unable to speak. Lucas thanked their friend with a tired smile. As soon as the door closed, silence fell on the couple, heavy with unsaid words and suppressed emotions. Mariana sat on the edge of the bed, staring into space. Lucas, feeling the palpable tension, knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Husband," he whispered, "we'll get through this. I promise." She looked up at him, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "How, Lucas? How can anyone get out of this? My own mother." His voice cracked, unable to finish his sentence. Lucas took her in his arms, rocking her gently. He wanted to reassure her, tell her that everything would be okay, but words failed him. Dona Clotilde's betrayal was too fresh, too painful. After a long moment, Mariana gently released herself from her husband's embrace. "I'm going to take a shower," she said in a tired voice. I need to be alone for a while." Lucas nodded, understanding her need for space. As the bathroom door closed, he sat on the bed with his head in his hands. The anger he had managed to contain until then threatened to boil over. He wanted to scream, to hit something, anything to release this rage that was boiling inside him. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when Mariana needed him so much. The sound of the water running in the shower seemed deafening in the silence of the night. Lucas got up and started pacing around the small room. His mind was racing, reliving every moment of that nightmarish day. He thought about their arrival at the airport, the excitement they felt to start their new life. How could everything have changed so quickly? How could Dona Clotilde have done such a thing to them? Lucas knew that his relationship with his stepmother had never been ideal. Dona Clotilde had always considered him not good enough for her daughter. But from there to selling their house? It was a level of betrayal he could never have imagined. The sound of the water stopped, pulling Lucas from his thoughts. A few minutes later, Mariana came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her wet hair stuck to her face. She seemed so vulnerable in that moment that Lucas' heart sank. "Are you feeling better?" he asked softly. Mariana shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know. I feel empty." Lucas approached her, delicately placing his hands on her shoulders. "We should try to get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll think about what we're going to do." She nodded, too exhausted to argue. They prepared for the night in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they finally slipped under the covers, Lucas pulled Mariana against him, hugging her tightly as if to protect her from the outside world. Despite the fatigue, sleep did not come. Lucas stared at the ceiling in the darkness, his mind refusing to calm down. Next to him, he felt Mariana's irregular breathing, a sign that she wasn't sleeping either. The hours passed, long and silent. Lucas thought about their house, about all the plans they had made. The kitchen they wanted to renovate, the small garden where they planned to plant flowers. All those dreams now seemed so far away, so unattainable. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the curtains, Lucas made a decision. He wouldn't let this situation destroy their marriage. No matter what, he would protect Mariana and rebuild what they had lost. Morning arrived, finding the couple still awake, their eyes dark and their minds foggy from lack of sleep. They stood up mechanically, exchanging few words. The smell of freshly brewed coffee attracted them to the kitchen, where Sophie and Thomas were waiting for them. "Did you manage to get some sleep?" Sophie asked, worried. Luke shook his head. "Not really. But it'll be okay." Thomas served them coffee, searching for the right words to comfort his friends. "Look, we're here for you. Whatever you decide to do, we'll support you." Mariana looked up from her cup, a faint smile on her lips. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what we would do without you." Breakfast took place in a strange atmosphere, a mixture of friendly support and underlying tension. Lucas kept glancing at Mariana, worried by her prolonged silence. After the meal, while Sophie and Thomas were preparing to leave for work, Lucas made a decision. "I'm going to call Mark," he announced. Mariana looked at him, surprised. "Mark? Your lawyer friend?" Lucas nodded. "We need legal advice. We need to know where we stand legally." For the first time since the day before, a glimmer of hope appeared in Mariana's eyes. "You're right. We can't leave things like this." Once alone in the apartment, Lucas took out his phone and dialed Mark's number. The lawyer, although surprised by this morning call, listened attentively to Lucas' story. "It's a complex situation," Mark admitted after a long moment of reflection. "But there may be some avenues to explore. Can you come by my office in the afternoon?" Lucas gratefully accepted, hanging up with a feeling of relief. Having a plan, no matter how vague, gave him back a sense of control. Meanwhile, Mariana had gathered up her courage and called her mother. The conversation was brief and tense. "Mom," Mariana began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." "What you did?" "I've already explained to you," Dona Clotilde cut in sharply. "I did what I had to do." "But it was our house," exclaimed Mariana, with tears in her eyes. "How could you do this to us?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Dona Clotilde spoke again, her voice seemed slightly less confident. I'm sorry things happened this way. But what's done is done." Mariana shook her head, incredulous at her mother's attitude. "You don't understand, do you? You destroyed our trust, our relationship." "Don't be so dramatic," replied Dona Clotilde, returning to her usual tone. "You're young, you'll get over it." The conversation ended soon after, leaving Mariana even more frustrated and hurt than before. When Lucas came back into the room, he found her crying on the couch. Without a word, he sat down next to her and took her in his arms. They stayed like that for a long time, sharing their pain in silence. Finally, Lucas broke the silence. "I spoke to Mark. He's expecting us this afternoon." Mariana nodded, grateful to have something to hold on to. "Okay. What do we do in the meantime?" Lucas thought for a moment. "We should gather all the documents we have on the house. Deeds, invoices, anything that might be useful." They spent the next few hours going through their belongings, gathering anything that might be related to their home. It was a painful task, each document bringing back memories of what they had lost. But it was also therapeutic in a way, as if they were gradually regaining control of their lives. The afternoon arrived quickly, and soon, Lucas and Mariana found themselves in Mark's office. The lawyer listened carefully, taking notes and asking specific questions. "The situation is delicate," he finally admitted. "The power of attorney your mother had complicates things. However, there may be irregularities in the sale that we could exploit." Lucas leaned forward, interested. "What kind of irregularities?" Mark looked through his notes. "The sale appears to have been completed very quickly. Too quickly perhaps. Besides, if we can prove that your mother acted against your best interests, we might have a strong argument." Mariana, who had remained silent until then, spoke. What if we prove that my mother has a gambling problem? That she sold the house to cover her debts?" Lucas looked at her, surprised by this suggestion. Mark nodded thoughtfully. "That would indeed be an important element. It would prove that the sale was not in your interest, but only in that of your mother. The meeting continued, with Mark explaining the different options available to them. When they finally left his office, Lucas and Mariana felt both exhausted and invigorated. They had a plan, a direction to follow. On the way back, Lucas took Mariana's hand in his. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "Together." Mariana squeezed his hand in return, a small smile on her lips. For the first time since their return, she felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happened, they would face this ordeal together, stronger than ever. The day was coming to an end, the sun setting over a city that seemed different to them. Their world had been turned upside down, but they were determined to rebuild it, brick by brick if necessary. The road would be long and difficult, but they were ready to travel it, hand in hand. The days that followed their meeting with Mark were a whirlwind of activities for Lucas and Mariana. Armed with new determination, they dove headfirst into collecting evidence and building their case. Sophie and Thomas' apartment, which always served as their temporary refuge, quickly transformed into a real investigation headquarters. Every morning, the couple woke up with renewed energy, ready to face the challenges of the day. Lucas, who had taken a special leave from work, spent his days on the phone, contacting banks, real estate agents, and anyone who might have been involved in the sale of their home. Mariana, for her part, had taken on the delicate task of tracing her mother's financial history. It was painful work, each discovery about donor Clotilde's gambling problems being like a dagger to her heart. But she persevered, knowing that this information could be crucial to their cause. One afternoon, while looking through old bank statements, Mariana let out a cry of surprise. "Lucas, come see this." Her husband, who was filing documents, rushed to her side. "What did you find?" Mariana pointed to a series of transactions on her computer screen. "Look at these withdrawals. They're all done near known casinos. And the amounts, it's huge." Lucas examined the readings carefully, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger rising within him. It's worse than we thought. Your mother really has a serious problem." Mariana nodded, tears in her eyes. "I can't believe she hid this from us for so long. How could I not see?" Lucas took her in his arms, holding her tightly against him. "It's not your fault, Marie. Your mother obviously tried very hard to hide her problems." They stayed like that for a moment, finding comfort in each other's presence. Then, slowly, Mariana released herself from the embrace. "We should call Mark. This information could be important to our case." Lucas nodded and took out his phone. The lawyer responded quickly, listening carefully to their explanations. "This is indeed an important discovery," Mark confirmed. "This reinforces our argument that the sale of the house was not in your best interest, but solely motivated by your mother's personal problems. I think it is time we meet again to discuss the situation." They set a meeting for the next morning. That night, Lucas and Mariana struggled to sleep, their minds churning with anticipation and worry. Mark's office was bathed in golden morning light when they arrived. The lawyer welcomed them warmly, inviting them to sit around the large conference table where many documents were already spread out. "I spent the night reviewing your file," Mark began. "With the new information you have provided me, I believe we have a solid basis to challenge the sale." Lucas and Mariana exchanged a look full of hope. "Really?" Lucas asked. "How are we going to do this?" Mark took out a thick file. "Here is our strategy. First, we will challenge the validity of the power of attorney. Although your mother had the legal right to act on your behalf, Mariana, we can argue that she abused this power by using it for personal purposes rather than for your own benefit." Mariana nodded, feeling both relieved and guilty. It was hard to go against her own mother, but she knew it was necessary. Secondly, Mark continued, "We are going to highlight the irregularity of the sale. The fact that it was concluded so quickly, without any consultation with you, is suspicious. We can argue that this goes against standard real estate practices." Lucas interjected, "And what about gambling issues? How does that fit into our strategy?" Mark nodded gravely. "This is a crucial element. It demonstrates that the motivation behind the sale was not your well-being, but the need to cover personal debts. This is a strong argument in our favor." The meeting continued for hours, with Mark explaining in detail every aspect of their legal strategy. There would be statements to be made, witnesses to be questioned, expert opinions to be requested. The road would be long and difficult, but for the first time since this ordeal began, Lucas and Mariana felt like they had a real chance of getting their home back. As they were leaving Mark's office, Mariana suddenly stopped. "Lucas," she said softly, "I think it's time I talk to my mother." "Really talk, I mean?" Lucas looked at her with concern. "Are you sure? This might be difficult." Mariana nodded. "I know. But I have to try. Maybe if she understands how much this hurt us, she'll agree to cooperate." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. But I'm coming with you. You don't have to face this alone." They went directly to Dona Clotilde. The ride was silent, everyone lost in their thoughts. When they arrived in front of the familiar house, Mariana took a deep breath before ringing the bell. Dona Clotilde opened the door, her face changing from surprise to suspicion as she saw the couple. "Mariana? Lucas? What are you doing here?" "Mom," Mariana said firmly, "we need to talk. Seriously this time." After a moment of hesitation, Dona Clotilde stepped aside to let them enter. In the living room, a heavy silence settled. Lucas stayed behind, letting Mariana lead the conversation. "Mom," Mariana began, "we know about your gambling problems." Dona Clotilde visibly paled, but maintained her defiant demeanor. "I don't know what you're talking about." Mariana shook her head sadly. "Please don't lie. We saw the bank statements, the withdrawals near the casinos. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you." For the first time, Dona Clotilde's confidence seemed to waver. She slumped into her chair, suddenly looking much older and tired. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle this on my own." Lucas, unable to remain silent any longer, interjected, "By selling our house? Was that really the only solution?" Dona Clotilde looked at him with a mixture of shame and defiance. "I had no choice. Debts were piling up, creditors were threatening me. I panicked." Mariana knelt before her mother, taking her hands in hers. "Mom, what you did hurt us deeply. But it's not too late to make things right. Help us get our home back. Then we can help you overcome your addiction." For a long moment, Dona Clotilde remained silent, her eyes downcast. Then, slowly, she raised her head, tears shining in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." It was the first time that Lucas and Mariana saw Dona Clotilde so vulnerable. It didn't undo the damage that had been done, but it was a start. "What should I do?" Dona Clotilde finally asked. Lucas stepped forward. "Our lawyer will need your testimony. Everything will have to be explained, the debts, the reason for the sale, everything." Dona Clotilde nodded slowly. "Okay. I will." As they left Dona Clotilde's house later that evening, Lucas and Mariana felt emotionally exhausted, but also strangely relieved. A weight seemed to have been lifted from their shoulders. "Do you think we can trust him?" Lucas asked as they got into the car. Mariana thought for a moment before answering. "I think she is sincere. But we will have to remain vigilant. This situation pushed her to betray us once, it could happen again." Lucas nodded, taking his wife's hand in his. "Whatever happens, we'll face this together." The following days were intense. Mark worked hard to integrate Dona Clotilde's testimony into their file. Lucas and Mariana continued their research, gathering more and more evidence to support their case. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Mark summoned them back to his office. His face was serious, but his eyes shone with a determined glint. "I have good news and bad news," he announced as soon as they were settled. Lucas and Mariana exchanged a worried look. "Start with the bad one," Lucas said. Mark nodded. "The bad news is that the process is going to be long and difficult. The new owner is not going to give up the house without a fight." Mariana shook Lucas' hand. "And the good news?" A smile appeared on Mark's face. "The good news is that I think we have a strong case. With your mother's testimony, the evidence we have gathered, and the irregularities in the sale, we have a good chance of winning." A mixture of relief and apprehension invades the couple. They knew there would still be a long way to go, but for the first time since this ordeal began, they saw a real glimmer of hope. "What do we do now?" Lucas asked. Mark leaned forward, his face serious. "Now we prepare for battle. It won't be easy, but I truly believe we can reclaim your home." As they left Mark's office that day, Lucas and Mariana felt both exhausted and invigorated. The future was still uncertain, but they were ready to fight. Together, they would weather this storm, knowing that on the other side, home awaited them. Night fell on the city as they returned to Sophie and Thomas's house. Tomorrow would be the start of a new battle, but tonight they savored this small moment of victory. Their love, put to the test by this crisis, only emerged stronger. Whatever the future held for them, they would face it hand in hand, more united than ever. The weeks that followed were intense for Lucas and Mariana. Each day brought its share of challenges, frustrations, but also small victories that motivated them to continue. Sophie and Thomas' apartment, although comfortable, began to seem cramped to them, their belongings piling up as they searched. One morning, when the sun was just rising over the city, Lucas was already in front of his computer, going through the documents related to the sale of their house for the umpteenth time. Mariana was still sleeping, exhausted from a long night spent examining her mother's old bank statements. Suddenly, something caught Lucas' attention. A detail, so small that he had missed it until now. On one of the fund's transfer documents, a bank account number looked strangely familiar. "It's not possible," he muttered to himself, his heart pounding. He rushed to his phone and dialed Mark's number, momentarily forgetting the early hour. "Lucas," replied the lawyer in a sleepy voice. "What's going on?" "Mark, I'm sorry to wake you, but I think I found something important," Lucas explained, excitement piercing his voice. "There's an account number on one of the transfer documents. I think it's an account in donor Clotilde's name." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, then Mark spoke, his voice suddenly alert. "Are you sure? If so, it could change a lot of things." "I'm not 100% sure, but it's worth checking, right?" "Absolutely," Mark confirmed. "I'm going to contact a financial investigator this morning. In the meantime, don't tell anyone, not even Mariana for now. We need to be sure before raising false hopes." Lucas reluctantly agreed, knowing that Mark was right. After hanging up, he sat for a while, his mind racing. If this account really existed, it would mean that donor Clotilde had not lost everything in the game as she claimed. But then, why did you sell your daughter's house? The day passed in a fog for Lucas. He found it difficult to concentrate, his mind constantly returning to this potential discovery. Mariana noticed his strange behavior but put it down to the stress accumulated over the past few weeks. It was only late in the afternoon that Mark called them back, asking them to come to his office immediately. The couple hurried there, the anticipation making the journey endless. When they entered Mark's office, they were surprised to find a woman there that they did not know. Mark quickly made the introductions. "Lucas, Mariana, this is Ms. Dubois. She is a financial investigator and worked on the information Lucas provided me this morning." Ms. Dubois, a serious-looking woman in her 50s, nodded in greeting. "What information are you talking about?" Mariana asked, confused. Lucas took a deep breath. "This morning I discovered an account number that seemed to be linked to your mother. I asked Mark to check." Mariana looked at him, a mixture of surprise and betrayal in her eyes. "And you didn't tell me anything?" "I didn't want to give you false hope," Lucas explained softly, taking her hand in his. Mark intervened before the situation got worse. "And he did well. Ms. Dubois, could you tell us what you discovered?" The investigator opened a file in front of her. "The account in question does exist. It is in the name of donor Clotilde and contains a considerable sum of money." A stunned silence fell over the room. Mariana was the first to break it. "How much?" she asked in a trembling voice. Ms. Dubois hesitated for a moment before answering. "A little over 500,000 euros. Lucas felt Mariana stagger beside him. He put an arm around her shoulders to support her. How is this possible?" Mariana stammered. "She told us that she had lost everything gambling, that she had to sell our house to pay off her debts." Mark leaned forward, his face serious. This is where things get interesting. Ms. Dubois has traced the origins of this money. It appears that much of it came from the sale of your house. Lucas felt a wave of anger rise within him. You mean she kept the money from the sale for herself? Mrs. Dubois nodded. Not all of the money, but a substantial part. The rest was indeed used to repay gambling debts, but these were much less than Dona Clotilde claimed. Mariana slumped in her chair, her face pale. I can't believe it. Why would she do that? Mark exchanged a look with Madame Dubois before responding. We have a theory. It appears that your mother did have a gambling problem, but she exaggerated it to justify selling your house. In reality, she was probably looking to build a financial safety cushion. Lucas clenched his fists, struggling to contain his anger. She lied to us. She destroyed our lives for her own gain. Mariana remained silent, staring into space. Lucas could almost see the wheels turning in his mind, trying to reconcile the image of his mother with this new reality. Mark spoke again, his voice laced with cautious optimism. This discovery is a significant game-changer. Not only does it strengthen our argument that the sale was fraudulent, but it also gives us significant negotiating leverage. What do you mean? Lucas asked. We can use this information to force Dona Clotilde to cooperate, Mark explained. If she refuses, we can threaten to expose her lies and financial manipulation, which could have serious legal consequences for her. Mariana finally looked up, a glimmer of determination shining through her tears. What do we do now? Mark straightened up, his face reflecting a new confidence. Now we go on the offensive. I suggest we arrange a meeting with your mother, Mariana. We will present her with the evidence we have and give her a chance to explain herself. Lucas nodded vigorously, but Mariana seemed hesitant. What if she refuses to cooperate? She asked softly. Then we will have no choice but to go to court, Mark replied. With this new evidence, our chances of winning are significantly increased. The couple exchanged a long look, communicating silently. Finally, Mariana nodded. Okay. Let's set up this meeting. The following days were a whirlwind of preparations. Mark worked hard to organize the meeting and prepare their strategy. Lucas and Mariana, meanwhile, went through an emotional roller coaster. For Mariana, her mother's betrayal was particularly difficult to digest. She oscillated between anger, sadness, and deep disappointment. Lucas did his best to support her, but he often felt helpless in the face of her pain. Finally, the day of confrontation arrived. Mark had chosen neutral ground for the meeting, a conference room in a downtown hotel. Lucas and Mariana arrived early, their stomachs knotted with apprehension. When Dona Clotilde entered the room, her normally assured face bore traces of worry. She sat across from her daughter and son-in-law, Mark taking a seat at the end of the table. Thank you for coming, Dona Clotilde, Mark began in a professional voice. We have important information to discuss with you. Dona Clotilde looked at her daughter, looking for a clue in her expression, but Mariana remained impassive. What is it about? She asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Mark took out a file and pushed it towards her. We discovered the existence of a bank account in your name. An account containing a large sum of money from the sale of Lucas and Mariana's house. Dona Clotilde's face visibly paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Mom, Mariana interjected, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Why did you lie to us? Why did you sell our house if you didn't really need it? Dona Clotilde lowered her eyes, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I was scared. Scared of the future, scared of running out of money. I thought I was doing the right thing. Lucas, who had tried to remain calm until then, could not contain his anger any longer. What was needed? You destroyed our dreams, our trust, all out of selfishness. Mark placed a soothing hand on Lucas' arm before turning to Dona Clotilde. Do you understand that your actions were illegal? You misused a power of attorney and misappropriated funds. We have enough evidence to take this matter to court. Dona Clotilde suddenly raised her head, panic visible in her eyes. No, please. I'll do whatever you want. Mark nodded, satisfied. Here's what we're proposing: you will return all of the money you kept from the sale. Additionally, you will help us undo the sale of the house by testifying to your actions. Dona Clotilde looked at her daughter, with tears in her eyes. Mariana, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, I didn't think. Mariana remained silent for a long moment, visibly struggling with her emotions. Finally, she took a deep breath. Mom, what you did is unforgivable. But if you cooperate fully, if you help us get our home back, maybe one day, maybe we can try to rebuild our relationship. Lucas squeezed his wife's hand, admiring her strength and compassion despite the betrayal. Dona Clotilde nodded, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. I will do whatever you want. Mark then took out a document prepared in advance. Here is an agreement we have drawn up. It states that you agree to return the money and cooperate fully in our efforts to get the house back. In exchange, we agree not to press charges against you. Dona Clotilde signed the document without hesitation, her hands trembling slightly. As they left the conference room that day, Lucas and Mariana felt exhausted but relieved. There would still be a long way to go before they got their home back, but for the first time in weeks, hope seemed real and tangible. In the car that took them back to Sophie and Thomas's, Lucas took Mariana's hand in his. You were amazing in this, he said softly. Mariana offered him a weak smile. We both were. I don't know how I would have gotten through all this without you. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city go by through the window. Then Mariana spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think one day I will be able to forgive him? Lucas squeezed her hand. I don't know, my love. But what I do know is that whatever you decide, I will be there to support you. Mariana rested her head on her husband's shoulder, drawing comfort from his presence. The future was still uncertain, but together they felt capable of facing any obstacle. Their love, put to the test by this crisis, only emerged stronger. And it is with this strength that they would face the challenges ahead, ready to fight to reclaim their homes and rebuild their lives. The days following the confrontation with Dona Clotilde were a whirlwind of activity for Lucas and Mariana. The agreement signed by Mariana's mother had opened up new possibilities, but there were still many obstacles to overcome. The couple, guided by Mark's expertise, embarked on a race against time to get their house back. One morning, when the sun was just rising over the city, Lucas and Mariana were already preparing for a crucial day. They had a meeting with the new owner of their house, a certain Mr. Dupont, in the hope of finding an amicable solution. Are you ready? Lucas asked softly as he adjusted his tie in front of the bathroom mirror. Mariana, who was finishing her makeup, nodded. As ready as possible. I just hope Mr. Dupont will be understanding. Lucas placed his hands on his wife's shoulders, meeting her gaze in the reflection of the mirror. Whatever happens, we'll face this together. They left Sophie and Thomas' apartment, which had been their refuge in recent weeks, and headed towards Mark's office where the meeting was to take place. On the way, Mariana couldn't help but think of her mother. Since the confrontation, they had exchanged only a few brief, formal messages. The wound of betrayal was still too fresh to allow for true reconciliation. When they arrived at Mark's office, they were surprised to see that Dona Clotilde was already there, sitting nervously in a corner of the waiting room. She looked up as they entered, a mixture of shame and hope in her eyes. Mariana, Lucas, she said softly. I wanted to be there. To support you. Mariana hesitated for a moment, torn between the anger that still simmered within her and the desire to believe in her mother's sincerity. Finally, she just nodded, unable to find the right words. Mark quickly joined them, his face displaying professional determination. Mr. Dupont has arrived, he announced. Are you ready? Lucas took Mariana's hand in his, squeezing it gently in support. Let's go, he said. They entered the conference room where Mr. Dupont was waiting for them. He was a man of around 50, with a strict appearance and a piercing gaze. He stood as they entered, greeting them with a polite but reserved nod. Mark took the lead, briefly presenting the situation and explaining why they had requested this meeting. Mr. Dupont listened attentively, his face betraying no emotion. I understand your situation, he finally said when Mark finished. But you have to understand that I bought this house in good faith. I invested time and money in renovations. I can't just give it back." Lucas felt Mariana tense beside him. He spoke, trying to keep his voice calm and collected. "We understand, Mr. DuPont. We are not asking you to return it for free. We are willing to reimburse you for the purchase price, as well as any renovation costs you incurred." Mr. DuPont shook his head. "It's not just about money. This house is a new beginning for my family and me. We've already moved in, we've started making memories here." Mariana, unable to remain silent any longer, intervened. "This house means a lot to us too, Mr. Smith. It was supposed to be the start of our life together, the place where we would start our family." A heavy silence settled in the room. Mark, feeling the tension rising, decided to intervene. "Perhaps we could consider additional compensation? An amount that would make the move more acceptable to you and your family, Mr. Smith?" Mr. DuPont seemed to think for a moment, his gaze moving from Lucas and Mariana to Dona Clotilde, who had remained silent until now. "I don't know," he said finally. "It's a difficult decision to make." It was then that Dona Clotilde spoke, surprising everyone. "Mr. Smith," she began, her voice trembling but determined, "I am the reason you are in this situation. I sold this house fraudulently, betraying the trust of my daughter and my son-in-law. I am ready to face the consequences of my actions." She turned to Mark. "I have savings, in addition to the money I kept from the sale. I am ready to give everything to repair the damage I have caused." Lucas and Mariana exchanged a stunned look. It was the first time that Dona Clotilde took full responsibility, without looking for excuses. Mark immediately seized the opportunity. "Mr. DuPont, with this additional contribution, we could offer you generous compensation, well beyond the purchase price and renovations. This would allow you to find a new property, perhaps even larger or better located." Mr. DuPont seemed shaken by this unexpected proposal. He remained silent for what seemed like an eternity, obviously weighing the pros and cons. Finally, he took a deep breath. "I'm going to need time to think about it and discuss it with my family. Can you give me a few days?" Mark nodded quickly. "Of course. Take the time you need. We will provide you with all the details of our proposal in writing by tomorrow." The meeting ended on this note of uncertainty. As they left the conference room, Lucas and Mariana felt exhausted but cautiously optimistic. Dona Clotilde followed them into the corridor, hesitant. "Mariana," she said softly, "I know this doesn't fix everything, but I wanted you to know that I am truly sorry. I will do everything in my power to help you get your home back." Mariana looked at her mother, emotions churning inside her. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you, Mom. It's a start." The days that followed were tense, filled with waiting and anxiety. Lucas and Mariana tried to go about their usual activities, but their thoughts kept returning to the house and Mr. DuPont's decision. Finally, almost a week after the meeting, Mark called them. "Mr. Smith has accepted our offer," he announced, joy evident in his voice. "He's ready to sell you the house." The news was greeted with cries of joy and tears of relief. Lucas hugged Mariana, both overcome with emotion. However, their happiness was short-lived. Mark still had news to tell them. "There is one condition, however," he continued. "Mr. DuPont asks that the move be done quickly. He gives you 1 month to finalize the transaction and regain possession of the house." Lucas and Mariana exchanged a look. 1 month was a very short time to gather all the necessary funds and organize the move. But this was their chance to reclaim their home, and they were determined to seize it. "We will," Lucas declared with determination. "Whatever it takes, we'll be ready in a month." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of frenetic activity. Between the administrative procedures, discussions with the bank to obtain a quick loan, and organizing the move, Lucas and Mariana barely had time to breathe. Dona Clotilde kept her word, providing all her savings to help finance the buyout. This gesture, although it could not completely erase the past, helped to ease the tensions between her and her daughter. As the deadline approached, stress mounted. There were moments of doubt, sleepless nights spent wondering if they were going to make it. But through every obstacle, Lucas and Mariana supported each other, drawing strength from their love and determination. Finally, the big day arrived. Standing in front of their house, keys in hand, Lucas and Mariana had a hard time believing it was real. They had managed, against all odds, to get their home back. As they crossed the threshold, hand in hand, a wave of emotions overwhelmed them. The house was different, Mr. DuPont's renovations were visible, but it was still fundamentally theirs. "We're home," Mariana whispered, tears in her eyes. Lucas held her close, kissing her forehead tenderly. "Yes, my love. We're finally home." They spent the day rediscovering each room, making plans for the future. There would still be challenges to overcome, wounds to heal, particularly in Mariana's relationship with her mother. But for now, they were simply enjoying the happiness of being back home. In the evening, sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over their neighborhood, Lucas and Mariana reflected on how far they had come. This ordeal had changed them, made them stronger, individually and as a couple. "You know," Lucas said softly, "despite everything that happened, I don't regret anything. It showed us how strong we are together." Mariana nodded, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "You're right. We've been through the worst, and we're still here, together. I love you, Lucas." "I love you too, Marie," he replied, placing a kiss on her hair. As night fell, enveloping their newfound home, Lucas and Mariana remained embraced, filled with gratitude and hope for the future. They had gotten back more than just a house, they had reaffirmed the strength of their love and commitment to each other. And it was with this renewed strength that they were ready to begin the next chapter of their lives, together, in their finally found home. The sun rose gently over the city, its golden rays caressing the facades of the sleeping houses. In their newly renovated room, Lucas and Mariana slowly woke up, savoring the calm and familiarity of their newfound home. It had now been a month since they had regained possession of their house, and each morning still brought its share of little joys and rediscoveries. Lucas stretched lazily, a smile on his lips as he looked at Mariana snuggled up against him. "Hello, my love," he whispered, placing a kiss on her forehead. Mariana opened her eyes, her face instantly lighting up. "Hello," she replied softly. "I still find it hard to believe that we are really here, at home." Lucas hugged her a little tighter against him. "I know. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out it was all a dream." They remained hugged for a few minutes, simply enjoying each other's presence and the feeling of security that their home gave them. Finally, Mariana stood up, a look of determination in her eyes. "Lucas," she began, "I've been thinking a lot the last few days. About my mother." Lucas stood up in turn, attentive. The relationship between Mariana and Dona Clotilde remained a delicate subject, despite the latter's efforts to redeem herself. "I think it's time," Mariana continued. "Time to give him a real chance to make amends." Lucas took his wife's hand in his, stroking it gently with his thumb. "Are you sure? I know how much his betrayal hurt you." Mariana nodded slowly. "Yes, it hurt me. Deeply. But I can't deny that she tried. Without her help, we probably wouldn't have been able to get our house back. And then..." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "She's my mother, Lucas. Despite everything, I still love her." Lucas smiles tenderly, admiring his wife's strength and compassion. "I understand. What do you want to do?" "I was thinking of inviting him to dinner," Mariana replied. "Here, at home. It would be a way to turn the page, to start again on new bases." Lucas nodded. "I think it's a great idea. We could even invite my parents, and Sophie and Thomas. Have a sort of belated housewarming party." Mariana's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "Oh yes, that would be perfect. A way to celebrate our new beginning, with everyone we hold dear." Excited by the idea, they spent the rest of the morning planning dinner. Lucas took it upon himself to call his parents and their friends, while Mariana, after a deep breath to give herself courage, dialed her mother's number. The conversation was brief but full of emotion. Dona Clotilde, surprised and moved by the invitation, accepted immediately, her voice betraying her relief and gratitude. The following days were filled with preparations. Lucas and Mariana cleaned the house from top to bottom, bought new decorations, and spent hours planning the menu. It was more than just a dinner for them, It was a celebration of their resilience, their love, and their ability to forgive. The evening of dinner finally arrived. The house was bathed in soft, dim light, the tantalizing smell of food being prepared wafting through the air. Lucas was putting the last touches on the table when the doorbell rang. "I'm going," Mariana called, straightening her dress nervously before opening the door. Dona Clotilde stood in the doorway, looking as anxious as her daughter. In her hands she held a bouquet of flowers and a small, carefully wrapped box. "Good evening, Mariana," she said softly. "Thank you for inviting me." There was a moment of silence, mother and daughter looking at each other, months of tension and unsaid words floating between them. Then, in a spontaneous burst, Mariana took a step forward and hugged her mother. Dona Clotilde, surprised, let out a little sob of relief before hugging her daughter back. Lucas, watching the scene from the living room, felt his heart swell with emotion. He knew how important this moment was for Mariana, and seeing mother and daughter reunited gave him hope for the future. The other guests arrived shortly after, Lucas' parents, Marie and Robert, followed closely by Sophie and Thomas. The atmosphere was initially a little tense, with everyone aware of the events that had preceded this meeting. But quickly, the warmth of Lucas and Mariana's welcome, combined with the good food and wine, relaxed the mood. During the meal, conversations flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and shared anecdotes. Dona Clotilde, initially reserved, gradually relaxed, participating in discussions and even exchanging a few jokes with Robert, Lucas's father. After dessert, while everyone was enjoying coffee, Dona Clotilde stood up, attracting everyone's attention. I'd like to say a few words, if you'll allow me," she began, her voice shaking slightly. Silence fell around the table, all eyes turned towards her. Dona Clotilde took a deep breath before continuing. "First of all, I wanted to thank you, Lucas and Mariana, for inviting me tonight. I know I don't deserve it, after everything I've done." She paused, searching for words. "I can never apologize enough for the hurt I caused. My fear and selfishness nearly destroyed my own daughter's happiness, and I will live with this remorse for the rest of my life." Tears shone in her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly before continuing. "But you gave me a second chance. A chance to redeem myself, to prove that I can be the mother and stepmother you deserve. And I promise to do everything I can to never disappoint you again." She then turned to the small box she had brought, taking it in her trembling hands. "I have something for you. It's not much compared to what I took from you, but I hope it can symbolize a new beginning." She handed the box to Mariana, who opened it carefully. Inside was an ancient key, attached to a delicate ribbon. "It's the key to your grandmother's country house," explained Dona Clotilde. "The one where you spent your summers when you were little, Mariana. I know how much you loved this place. I had it renovated in the last few months. It's yours now." An amazed silence fell on the room. Mariana stared at the key, eyes wide, carefree summers flooding her mind. Lucas, just as surprised, put a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder. "Mom," finally murmured Mariana, the voice loaded with emotion. "I don't know what to say." Dona Clotilde gently shook her head. "You have nothing to say, my darling. It is up to me to speak, and to act, to repair my mistakes. This house. It is a new start for all of us. A place where you can create new memories, start your family." Lucas, moved by this gesture, got up to shake the hand of his mother-in-law. "Thank you, Dona Clotilde. It's an incredible gift." The other guests, touched by the scene, spontaneously applauded. The atmosphere in the room had changed, loaded with a palpable emotion and a feeling of renewal. The rest of the evening took place in an atmosphere of celebration and reconciliation. Anecdotes on the country house were shared, family weekend projects were mentioned. For the first time in months, Mariana really felt in peace, surrounded by her united family. Late at night, when the guests had left and Lucas and Mariana met alone, they sits on the steps, contemplating the stars. "It was an incredible evening," murmured Lucas, tightening Mariana against him. Mariana nodded, playing distractedly with the key to the country house. "I would never have imagined that things would happen like this. My mother, this gift." Lucas put a kiss on his temple. "It's a new start, my love. For all of us. Mariana turned to him, shiny eyes. Lucas, there is something I wanted to tell you. I was waiting for the right time, and I think it's now. Lucas' heart leaps in his chest, anticipating what was going to follow. I am pregnant, announced Mariana slowly, a radiant smile illuminating her face. Lucas stayed frozen for a moment, assimilating the news. Then, in a cry of joy, he raised Mariana in his arms, spinning her on the steps. We're going to have a baby, he exclaimed, laughing and crying at the same time. They remained entwined for a long time, savoring this new stage in their lives. Their house, so close to being lost, was now the scene of their greatest happiness. You know, said Lucas by putting a hand on Mariana's still flat belly, I think this little country house will be perfect for our family weekends. Mariana nodded, tears of joy flowing on her cheeks. Our family. I can't wait to see what the future has in store for us. As they got into their house, hand in hand, Lucas and Mariana knew that they had crossed an ordeal that could have broken them. But instead, she had made them stronger, more united. Their love had been tested and turned out to be indestructible. The night slowly enveloped their house, witness silent of their hopes and their dreams. In this home they had almost lost, a new life took root. And with it, the promise of a future filled with love, forgiveness, and new adventures. Lucas and Mariana fell asleep that night, a light and hopeful heart. Their story, which had started in pain and betrayal, now opened to a new chapter full of promises. And they were ready to write it together, page after page, day after day, in the house which had finally become their real home.